Welcome to Social Influence, Lesson 9, Dispositional Explanations for Obedience, the Authoritarian Personality. My name is Nick Redshaw. I'm co-author of the highly successful Independent Learner series of student workbooks that is available on Amazon. I also have 16 years of experience teaching A-level psychology. In the last lesson, you looked at Hoeffling's research, so I'd like you to have a go at this question. The nurses in Hoeffling et al.'s 1966 study were real nurses doing their regular job. They did not consent to take part in Hoeffling's experiment. Discuss the ethics of this situation for 3 marks. At this point, you may want to pause the video to complete the question. Okay, welcome back. The nurses in Hoeffling's research for 3 marks, 1 mark for each ethical issue that is clearly linked to Hoeffling's research. Possible suggestions. Simply, the principal ethical issue of Hoeffling's study are that nurses were deceived and had no opportunities to give informed consent. In addition, the nurses would have suffered psychological harm, as once debriefed, nurses would have felt shame, guilt, embarrassment, and their professionalism had been undermined. So moving on, dispositional explanations for obedience, the authoritarian personality. In addition to situational explanations of why people obey, as investigated by Milgram, other researchers claim that there are dispositional explanations, i.e. personality traits. During the 1950s, there was a huge interest in trying to explain conditions that allowed Nazism to gain a foothold in Europe. Psychologists led by Theodor Adorno and Max Horkheimer claim that the behavior of Nazi soldiers was due to an authoritarian personality. They believe that individuals with this type of personality had many similar traits, including the following: blind allegiance to conventional beliefs about right and wrong, respect and obedience to those in authority, belief in aggression towards those who do not share the same conventional beliefs, a tendency to project one's own feelings of inadequacy, rage and fear onto a weak group. In order to investigate this, they created and used various controversial psychological scales, the most notable and enduring being the F scale, F for fascism, to attempt to explain racism and the atmosphere that led to the slaughter of 6 million Jews and others in psychological terms. The scale is still used today and continues to provide valuable insights into the rise of fascism in Europe today. Adorno et al.'s 1950 study looking at the authoritarian personality. The aim: to determine if prejudice is a result of an individual's personality type. Procedure: participants comprised of 2,000 white Americans. A questionnaire called the F scale, F for fascism, was used. Example questions included: every person should have complete faith in a supernatural being whose decision he obeys without question. The businessman and the manufacturer are more important to our country than artists and writers. The results: Adorno found that those that scored highly on the questionnaire were hostile to those of inferior status, but obedient of those in high status, fairly rigid in their opinions and beliefs, and held traditional values. Conclusions: from this, Adorno concluded that authoritarian personalities were more likely to categorize people into groups, us and them, with their own group being superior. People with an authoritarian personality were found to have a strict upbringing and harsh parents. Adorno concluded that because they could not express hostility towards their own parents, they took out their frustration on the weak, such as ethnic minorities. From Adorno's research, it was claimed that individuals with an authoritarian personality were more likely to be obedient and prejudiced. Characteristics developed through early childhood experiences included rigid beliefs in conventional values, general hostility towards other groups, intolerance, submissive attitudes towards authority figures, and dismissive attitudes towards those considered beneath them. Miller, 1986, looked at Milgram's original study and found that those participants that were prepared to carry out electric shocks to the maximum 450 volt level displayed many of the characteristics of an authoritarian personality, therefore supporting Adorno's claim. If you are using one of our workbooks or your teacher has downloaded our workbook from TESS, please complete the following tasks. If you haven't, then use a piece of paper and complete the tasks also. Milgram, 1966, found a correlation between fully obedient participants and high scores on an F scale. Explain one strength and one weakness of using a correlation analysis to study obedience. This is for 4 marks. You may want to pause the video at this point in order to answer the question. Okay, welcome back. So, this question here, in the exam, they give you a little scenario. Obviously, the key point here is correlation. However, the actual question itself asks you to explain one strength and one weakness of using a correlation to study obedience. So you need one strength and one weakness of correlational research. However, you need to link it to studying obedience. So, for the top mark band, outline one strength and one weakness of using a correlation is generally accurate with some detail. The answer is clear, coherent, and specialist terminology is used effectively. So an advantage. A strength is that a correlation analysis can be used when the manipulation of variables is impossible. That's 1 mark. Due to ethical or practical reasons. Milgram's research on obedience had many ethical concerns. That's the other mark. Other possible advantages: possible to obtain large amounts of data more rapidly than experimental methods. Correlation research can produce reasonable information about causal relationships that can be used to develop further research ideas. Disadvantage: a weakness is that cause and effect, 1 mark, cannot be established because the variables are not directly manipulated. Therefore, obedience may not be due to situational factors, but other factors such as personality, 1 mark. Okay, so if you now try the next question, every one of the questions on Adorno's scale is worded in the same direction. Explain how this might lead to responder bias. And you may want to pause the actual video at this point. Okay, welcome back. So, every one of the questions on Adorno's scale is worded in the same direction. Explain how this might lead to responder bias. The marks for this question is 1 mark of AO2 and 3 marks of AO3. 3 marks for a clear explanation of why the question on Adorno's scale and how they were worded might lead to responder bias. So, the actual mark breakdown here is 1 mark of AO2 and 2 marks of AO3. So possible suggestions: simply, participants are prone to responder bias. For example, you may choose the first option or simply agree with the question. Or if the question has been worded in a particular way, they do this because they are either short on time or cannot be bothered to answer truthfully. Or respond in a way that makes them look or try and please the experimenter. This is known as social desirability. Furthermore, it has been found that participants have a right bias, so will tick items on the right of the page, as in the case with the F scale. So the final task here, which you may want to complete as homework: by today's standards, many studies of social influence would be judged unethical. Discuss ethical issues that have arisen in social influence research. Refer to evidence in your answer. There are 10 marks here, 5 marks for AO1 and 5 marks for AO3. So by many standards, many studies of social influence would be judged unethical. Discuss ethical issues that may have arisen in social influence research and refer to evidence in your answer. So, for the top band here, which you should be aiming for, knowledge of ethical issues that have arisen in social influence research is accurate and generally well detailed, and relevant evidence is appropriate. Discussion is thorough and effective, and the answer is clear and organised. So 5 marks for AO1, 5 marks for AO3. So, AO1 possible content, up to 5 marks for description of ethical issues that have arisen in social influence research. Likely issues include protection from harm, participant embarrassment, stress, deception, right to withdraw, informed consent, confidentiality. Description of relevant evidence to illustrate specific issues, how Milgram deceived participants and did not get informed consent, how Ash caused participants stress and embarrassment, and Hoffling, the damage to the nurse's reputation. In order for the AO3, the answer must address the question, discuss ethical issues and refer to evidence. Therefore, only 1 mark can be awarded for relevant evidence, which does not include specific reference to ethical issues. Likewise, maximum marks for 1 mark for simply listing or naming ethical issues. AO3, evaluation points, up to 5 marks for discussion of ethical issues. So, likely points here should include counter-arguments such as why deception or unethical procedures were necessary, i.e. to reduce demand characteristics and thus increase validity. Discussion of procedures that were designed to address, resolve ethical issues, i.e. debriefing, retrospective consent. Contradictory evidence. Many of Milgram's participants claimed they were happy to have been involved when questioned. Cost-benefit analysis of ethical concerns set against the relative merits. Credit discussion about BPS or APS guidelines, where set up and why. Likely studies that you should include come from Milgram, Sheriff, Ash, Bickman, Hoffling, Crutchfield and Zimbardo. Note, if only 1 issue is discussed, then this will be treated as partial performance. And that brings us to the end of this lesson.